Coming up in the Bahamas tonight, we now know when nomination day will take place ahead of the May 7th general elections. Prime Minister Ingram having more to say about the upcoming elections, find out who preempted the announcement of the date and how he feels about the blunder. The opposing parties having their say tonight now that we know when elections will be held. And our outstanding Caribta athletes get a big treat for their stellar performance. Details straight ahead. The Bahamas Tonight starts right now.
Covering the islands of the Bahamas, ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's, I'm loving it.
It is great to have you with us for the Bahamas Tonight National Report. I'm Clint Watson reporting tonight. The Prime Minister revealing that the 2012 general elections will be held on Monday, May 7th. Today's Gazette outlined the Parliamentary Registration Department's notice of election for the House of Assembly and centers for nomination. Nominations will take place next week, Tuesday, April 17th, between 9 a.m. and 12 noon. Candidates can obtain nomination paper forms at the Nomination Center or the Parliamentary Registration Department during office hours. All nomination papers must be delivered to the Nomination Center's returning officer. In New Providence, there are some 23 nomination centers, and in the Family Islands, nominations for all 15 Family Island constituencies will be held at the administrator's office. Well, with the House dissolved and election mode kicking into high gear, Parliamentary Commissioner Errol Bethel tells us what happens next for politicians and candidates offering to serve. Their biggest day before the votes are cast on May 7th is Nomination Day, which takes place next week, Tuesday, April 17th.
To nominate, they should come with their documents. There are three basic documents. The three documents are first the nomination paper, then there's the declaration paper, and then there's a third document, which is a paper which tells about their assets and their liabilities. They must submit those three documents properly filled out. And if they have other declarations they wish to make, they may bring those also. And they must pay a fee of $400 to nominate.
Nominees will also have to bring a letter indicating which symbol they hope to use during the election. Commissioner Bethel also spoke to persons who, for the first time ever, may, because of circumstances, have to vote early.
If people have special reasons that they would like to apply to us for permission to vote in the advance poll, like persons who may be patients in hospitals or recent pregnancy, things of that nature, persons if they apply to us and we see what the reasons are, we think it's a good reason, we can give approval for persons to vote.
Now, as we said at the top of the news, during the Prime Minister's national address last night, he officially announced the much-anticipated election date, Monday, May 7th. That leaves just 26 days of campaigning until voters decide who will govern for the next 5 years. The next 3 weeks will see election fever at its highest as parties vie for the votes of some 172,000.
Whatever the outcome, this will be an historic election on many levels. As of today, I announced that the register of voters is closed. This means there will be no more registrations and no more transfers of registrations. With the closing of the register, it is my privilege to tell you that there are some 172,000 registered voters in the Bahamas. This is 22,000 more registered voters than the last election, and the highest number of registered voters ever recorded in the Bahamas.
Now, past elections have shown that many registered voters did not actually cast votes. Prime Minister Ingram urged that each registered voter exercise their enshrined right to vote.
No matter what political party you lean toward, the most important thing you can do if you are a registered voter is to vote. So please check or collect your voter's card. Make sure the information on it is correct, and if it isn't, have it corrected at once. Casting a ballot is a right of all registered voters. We've strived to make sure that those registered voters who are unable to vote on election day because of travel schedules, hospitalization, pregnancies, or government assignments overseas will not miss the opportunity to exercise that right.
And while his party's central campaign message is based on having delivered in the past 5 years, Mr. Ingram admitted to having governed during the worst economic times in recent history. But he talked about making steady progress to combat social ills while improving the lives and opportunities each Bahamian is exposed to. Well, the financial decisions made in the past 5 years were meant to protect jobs and move the Bahamas forward. This from Prime Minister Ingram, who says the Free National Movement now sits ready for victory. Today, the Prime Minister discussed a number of issues related to early voting and the national debt. Shanique Miller has more.
It was the FNM's Elizabeth candidate, Dr. Dwayne Sands, who preempted the Prime Minister by announcing the May 7th date of the next general election before it became official. But party leader Prime Minister Hubert Ingram says there is no fallout. In fact, the Prime Minister says it was an honest mistake on Sands' part.
Dwayne Sands heard a story on Love 97 at 1 o'clock. On the basis that he BBM'd his various people and said elections would be on the 7th. Dwayne Sands had no means of knowing when elections would be called because I hadn't told him or anybody else. And so it was a good guess. Nothing wrong with what he did.
In fact, the Prime Minister says he and his team are singularly focused.
People are energized, they are enthusiastic, they are ready to vote. They are confident that they're going to win the election. They need to work and continue to work at it.
Now, during this campaign season, the PLP has criticized the government on the increasing national debt. But Prime Minister Ingram says the choice between preserving jobs or pinching pennies was clear.
We'd be happy to talk about the debt, because whatever I borrowed, I can show you where it is on the ground. You could touch it, you could feel it. Ask them what happened to the monies they borrowed. I can fire a gang of people and lower the national debt. I can reduce services and lower the national debt. I'm seeking to maintain services, grow the economy, improve the infrastructure, and at the same time operate within affordable limits. This argument that national debt is a bunch of nonsense is a manufactured thing by the PLP.
For the first time, this election season makes provision for a wider cross-section of people to vote early. Before now, only a few who fall under the category of essential services were afforded this privilege.
We have modernized and updated our laws. So, for instance, Paige here, who's getting married, if she wanted to go on her honeymoon, she'd be able to vote at the pre-poll and have her vote counted on election day. If somebody is going to be on vacation, somebody's going to be hospitalized, somebody is pregnant and expect to have their baby in that period of time, somebody who is a candidate for a constituency in the Family Islands, they and their spouses can vote early. If people are going to go and work for other candidates off the island, they can apply, they can all vote early. So one doesn't have to lose the right to vote simply because you are unable to be here on election day if you are registered to vote. Now you have to go through a process. You have to apply to the parliamentary commissioner. You have the good reasons why you are doing so. And if he accepts it, you'll go on a list.
Now, the drive to get Bahamians to vote began more than a year ago. The National Register closed Thursday, April 5th, Maundy Thursday. Once the writ was issued on Tuesday, Bahamians rushed to the Parliamentary Registration Department in a last bid to register. Many of them criticized the government for closing the register.
How many times did the Prime Minister of the Bahamas not call upon people to register to vote? There's never been a longer process, a more organized process in the history of the Bahamas. For some people, you are never going to be on time for them. No, I'm not concerned about that at all. Everybody had more than ample opportunity to register. What you ought to do is compare the register of 2002 and 2007.
Ingram said, should the FNM win, he will serve out a full 5-year term. Meantime, the Organization of American States has already committed to coming here to observing the May 7th general elections. Shanique Miller, ZNS News.
As you just heard, well, Governor General Sir Arthur Folkes received today a letter from the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Jose Miguel Insulza, confirming a request made by the government to observe the May 7th general elections. This request comes as the OAS celebrates 50 years of observing elections. The Bahamas will join regional counterparts Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia and Guyana by inviting international observers to scrutinize the election process. Earlier this year, amendments were passed on the Parliamentary Elections Act to make provision provisions for international observers. Our Janea Noel Ferguson takes a closer look at the role they will play come Election Day.
The 2012 general elections will undoubtedly be an historic one. For the first time, international independent observers will monitor our general elections. Prime Minister the Right Honorable Hubert Ingraham confirmed in his national address Tuesday which groups will participate.
For the first time ever, international observers from the Organization of American States, CARICOM, and the United States of America to come to the Bahamas and see a truly historical event.
According to the Organization of American States website, the Electoral Observation Mission, or EOM, recently observed the March 11th elections in El Salvador and recommended that the Central American country design new legislation on political parties and campaigns in order to ensure maximum levels of transparency in future elections. The OAS will also observe elections in the Dominican Republic on May 20th. Now that our election process will be on the public stage for the world to see, will this change the way we conduct ourselves? By law, observers can scrutinize the register, enter polling places and those designed for counting votes, and seek information from the parliamentary commissioner or his staff. Independent observers will also have a right to obtain a copy of the register for any polling division in the country. As for privileges, observers will be afforded immunities under the Diplomatic Privileges and Immunities Act, but any person who interferes with the work of observers will be subject to a fine of $10,000 or imprisonment for a term of 18 months. And if you have any ideas about impersonating an observer to obtain admission into any polling place, the fines are the same. The act calls for all observers to be properly identified. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister continues to make the appeal for a fair and clean election process.
Equally as important, we must have a clean, free, fair, and honest election, as these are the most sacred aspects of democracy.
Janea Noel Ferguson, ZNS News.
The opposition Progressive Liberal Party claims Hubert Ingraham has been forced to ring the bell for the 2012 elections. The Progressive Liberal Party says it is ready to bring big change, starting on day one with a new generation of leaders, new ideas and new solutions. The Progressive Liberal Party believes Bahamian voters are asking three big questions: which party believes in Bahamians and will put Bahamians first, which party will fight crime and reduce violence, which party has a plan to create jobs by ensuring Bahamians have the skills they need to compete in the 21st century. According to the PLP, the answer to all three questions is the Progressive Liberal Party. Well, members of the Progressive Liberal Party pinpointing at least 10 ways why they say the FNM government has made the Bahamian economy worse than it was despite this global recession. They say in 2007, when the FNM took over, the unemployment rate was 7.9%, and today that figure has more than doubled to 15.9% and 21% in Grand Bahama. PLP candidate for Marathon, Senator Jerome Fitzgerald, says a high rise in unemployment is not the only critical area the FNM government has failed to deliver on. He says the government's management style has also affected the economy.
They failed to put Bahamians first. First point, they borrowed massively for infrastructure spending, but then directed the money to foreign contractors and workers instead of Bahamians. The infrastructure spending, paid for by a big run-up in the national debt, should have resulted in more jobs for Bahamians and more spending in the Bahamian economy.
Well, PLP candidate for Golden Isles, Michael Halkitis, explains why he feels the slow economic period has made it even more difficult for the Bahamas under an FNM government.
Under the FNM, it has become more difficult to do business in the Bahamas. In fact, the Bahamas fell 30 spots in global ease of doing business rankings in the past few years. Colombia, Tunisia, Rwanda, Puerto Rico, Slovenia, and Panama are just a few of the 84 nations which now rank ahead of the Bahamas in the Ease of Doing Business Index.
The government has gone on record saying despite the tough economic global recession, it has maintained a strong footing in the financial sector by introducing supporting legislation and has seen an increase in the tourism sector thanks to innovative programs put in place by public and private partnerships. The government also credits its major infrastructure and building programs to providing jobs for residents and small businesses. Well, the Democratic National Alliance is pleased that a date has finally been set for general elections in the Bahamas. However, DNA leader Branville McCartney is not in agreement with the process. He feels the Prime Minister should not be the only person making that decision and knowing the date. Mr. McCartney says this is not a positive move for a democratic country like the Bahamas.
He certainly took advantage of where we are today as a democracy. But hopefully when the DNA becomes a government, we will change that. You will know when the election date is. There will be fixed election dates, and it won't be one man knoweth, all will knoweth the date.
The Democratic National Alliance will highlight other national issues, including good governance, at its town meeting on Thursday night at the Hilton Hotel. Term limits for prime ministers, set dates for elections, and electoral reform will also be discussed. The DNA will also release its code of conduct for party members.
In light of the call that has been made for election day, I'm asking the Prime Minister to consider the fact that a public debate is warranted among the leaders of the major parties. This call was made some time ago, and I think we are at a stage in our country's development where leaders of the major parties and other parties ought to debate the issues. I think the Bahamian people deserve that.
Well, the Bahamas Constitution Party says it's scolding the Prime Minister for, quote, gray integrity. Chief Servant Leader and North Abaco candidate Ali McIntosh says following a 6-day vacation, she returned to the country and was greeted with the news of the call of the next general elections. She criticized the Prime Minister for having the Provost Marshal, Ellison Greenslade, go back to the steps of the Parliament twice in one day to read 2 proclamations, while Mr. Ingham flew to Abaco to sign a contract of a mini hospital. She says this questions the integrity of the office of the Prime Minister by performing actions and functions he no longer has the mandate to do, in her opinion, having just dissolved Parliament and the disbanding of the Cabinet, which in her view fully relinquishes his powers as Prime Minister and leader of the government. However, yesterday in an interview with ZNS News, National Security Minister Tommy Turnquest was clear that while Parliament is dissolved, the government and Cabinet continues to run the country until Governor General invites the winner on Election Day to form a new government.